Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I'm talking to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What do they do to get started and what are they doing to stay there? And today, man, I've got a special guest on our show today. Her name is Jill Cole, the Chief Human Resources Officer at Mid-Atlantic Dental Partners, Dental One Partners, and Perfect Teeth. She has an SPHR. She has a master's in human resource management. And I am so glad to have you on the show today. How are you, Jill?
I am great, Bruce. Thank you so much for having me. It's truly my honor. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'm honored to have you. And I want to give a quick shout out. We have a mutual friend that actually introduced us. His name is Mike Pierce. Mike is an executive at Lockton in Dallas. And so, hey, let's give him a quick shout out.
Exactly. Thank you, Mike. You're awesome. Highly recommend Mike.
Yeah, Mike also serves the Dallas HR community. I've known Mike for a long, long time and just incredible guy. Well, listen, I'm glad to have you on the show today because you know, when we talked before, we were talking about leadership. And so we're going to talk, of course, leadership. We're going to talk about common traits that we see in leaders. We're going to talk about trust. We're going to talk about a whole lot of stuff. And so, but before we get started, I want everyone to know a little bit more about Mid-Atlantic Dental Partners and how you serve their customers. Can you share a brief highlight?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, Mid-Atlantic is relatively new, started in 2018 in Pennsylvania. It is private equity backed. And so they started out around 200 employees with some practices, bought another practice in I think it was late 2018, practice called Berner Dental Holdings, which is known more commonly as Perfect Teeth. And they operate primarily in Colorado and Arizona. And then in New Mexico. And then kind of unexpectedly, due to some financial things, they bought in 2019 Dental One Partners, which had about 1,200 employees. And so they grew kind of really fast overnight. And then COVID happened, of course, in 2020. So I came on board in August of 2020, so at the end of August. And so right now we've got about 2,200 employees covering 17, 18 states, and we've got about 225 practices. So we're a dental services organization. So we do pretty much everything from pediatric dentistry all the way up to, you know, dentures and Invisalign orthodontics. So kind of the whole gamut of the mouth, if you will.
Oh man, and much needed. I actually, before this podcast, I actually got a recording that my dental office was letting me know they're back open and I need to get in there and schedule an appointment. Hey, you know, there is so much to cover, but I want to start by you sharing the Jill Cole story. I would love for you to share a little bit about you and hey, where'd you grow up and how in the world did you get into HR?
You know, I grew up in East Texas, if you can't tell by my dialect. It's pretty strong. I grew up in a town called Texarkana. So I'm from a small East Texas town, East Texas girl, born and raised there. And so when I went off to college, I went to another East Texas town, Stephen F. Austin in Nacogdoches. And I went there with these intentions of, I'm going to be a doctor because my dad's a doctor, my mom's a nurse. So I'm like, I'm going to follow in their footsteps. And I came home one weekend and I watched my dad, who was on call. He's an orthopedic surgeon. I watched him do a hip surgery on someone. And I decided right then and there, you know, maybe not. It's not for me. So too much blood just wasn't my thing. So went back to school, changed my major to business, but didn't know what I wanted to do in business. And I thought, well, maybe I'll go into marketing. That seems a little fun. And I ended up transferring to University of Texas at Arlington about my sophomore, junior year. And I ended up, part of their curriculum was taking an HR class. And I took it and I was like, wow, that's what I want to do. I like this. And so I went and talked to the professor and she said, okay, before you're sure that this is where you want to land, why don't you do an internship? And I was like, how do we do that? Let's do it. And so she took me to the office, got signed up for an internship. I started it that spring and haven't looked back. 24 years, haven't looked back. I loved it. I love everything about it. It's fun because it changes every day. And with me being my ADD self, I love that about it. So it's the constant change. And I feel like it kind of gives me insight to a little bit of everything going on. So I like it. So yeah, that's how I got started.
Oh, wow. That's great. You know, Texarkana, I didn't realize you were from Texarkana. So I'm
Yep.
curious. So was your internship, was that in the, when you were going to Stephen F. Austin, was that in that area or was that in Texarkana? Where'd you do that internship at?
I actually did my internship through UTA. And so I actually did it at a company in Arlington called Oil States Industries. And
Ah,
so I started there, and it was a great internship because they had a really good, solid team. And they taught me, I came in right at open enrollment time. So I got to learn benefits. I got to learn performance reviews. I got to just kind of see, they really allowed me a great hands-on experience to see if that's really what I wanted to do. So it was a fantastic internship.
wow. Well, I
Good
mean,
foundation.
what great advice, right? So, hey, why don't you try this
Yeah.
internship, make sure you like it,
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden you found yourself immersed into HR. I love that. I asked about Texarkana because I had LaTanya McElroy, who's the VP of HR, and she is a chapter leader for a SHRM chapter in
Oh,
Texarkana. And so she's phenomenal. She was a past guest on the show. And so
mhm.
I'm sure that I'll be connecting both of you before it's over with.
I'd love it.
Hey, so, okay, so she shared with you about this idea or persuaded
Hmm.
you, hey, take this internship, which leads me to mentorship. I love to talk
Hmm.
about the importance of mentors. Can you share just, I mean, some people that have helped you along your journey? And then also, do you
Absolutely.
mentor others now that you've had a lot of success in your role?
Absolutely. Yeah. Some good mentors in my life uh, professionally would be probably my first boss out of college. To shorten the story, they hired me right out of college, 22 years old. It was me and my boss, the HR manager, and we had 550 employees in 2 states, and she was 6 months pregnant. And so they hired me, in June. We had open enrollment and college recruiting coming up. She goes out unexpectedly on maternity leave, and you've got a 22-year-old leading your open enrollment and your college recruiting and year-end everything. So I did it, obviously, and I didn't know any of the backstory. When she came back one day, I came in and they let me know that she was no longer with the company. They had fired her and they promoted me. And I was like, you guys have lost your mind. I'm 23 at the time. I still don't even know my head from my tail. What are you doing? And he said, just trust me. I'm not going to let you fail. And he was our CFO, and he was a little peculiar, but he really took me under his wing, and he made sure I had the right training. He sent me to tons of training. He sent me to stuff even outside of work to just make sure I was well-rounded. Some political things. He really said, he goes, you've got good leadership and good likability quality. So I want to build on that. And he really did. He put me in some positions that I think for 23-year-old were a little questionable, and I'm talking about in terms of decision making, and the ability to do some things that impacted the organization as a whole. But he trusted me, he worked with me and guided me through it, and he believed in me when I didn't really believe in myself. And I would say I kind of building on that, my dad was also very influential in terms of, when I was finishing up my bachelor's degree, I was like, whew, I'm done with college, yay. And he said, no, you're not. You're going to go to grad school. And I was like, you going to pay for it? But he said, you've got to go. It's not a choice. You've got to do it to have a leg up in your career. You need to do this. Just trust me on it. He was very, very adamant that I do it, wouldn't let go. And I was talking to my boss about it, and he said, yeah, you need to do this. And so I started going to graduate school while I was working full-time as a HR manager. And he even told me, he said, you've got a bachelor's degree, do your master's in something specific. Do it in HR if that's what you want your career path to be. And so that's why I got a Master of Science in HR. So he was very influential in that. And then, of course, my dad for his resilience in making sure that I never stopped in grad school. And then I obviously, my husband, I definitely cannot mention him because he always, throughout my career, we've been together for 18 years, and he's constantly being the loving devil's advocate that he is. He challenges me on my thinking. He challenges me on leading, when he can hear me in conversations, and he's really good about being that sounding board for me, but also giving me the constructive feedback that I need with regards to, hey, maybe think about this, or have you thought about doing this with this person and stuff. So he's also been very influential in terms of how I've grown as a leader. But do I mentor other people? Yeah. There was someone who came to me in one of my past lives who had 0 HR experience. And I thought, oh gosh, how are we going to do this? Because we were growing so fast and I really needed somebody with HR experience. But, I pretty much just did okay, watch me. And I'm going to, train through some of that, but we're going to go through some stuff slowly. And then I'm going to expect you to do it. When it came time for her to do some of her, calling people even for recruiting, she just cried, I don't want to do it. It's too tough. And I'm like, okay, you have to. If you're going to be in HR, you have to talk to people. That's just part of it. So I've forced her into that. And then when it's time for her to do new hire orientation, she bawled and squalled, I just don't want to do it. But you've watched me for months. You've got this. You can do it. And so I forced her hand on it. And I kept forcing her. I will say she followed me to another job. She became an HR director, and she's actually in law school to do employment law right now. So yeah, it's believing in people when they don't believe in themselves. And when you can see, I think, some things in them that they can't see, even forcing them out of their comfort zone, I think that's imperative, because if we allow people to constantly stay in their comfort zone, they're never going to develop. They're never going to spread their wings. And so I think, if anything, that's probably what I'm best at, is forcing people's hands in that, but doing so respectfully, but just trying to get them to get out of what they don't want to do, to let them know they can do it and they can be good at it. And she did. She's very successful.
Man, that's fantastic. Listen, anyone who's listening right now or watching this podcast, I want you right now to pull out a journal and get your pen out and start writing this down, because there is gold here. I'm just a couple of things you mentioned. The first thing you mentioned was, and we're going to talk about this more because I think this is important. You talked about likability in leadership. And your mentor, and talked about, you had that likability factor. I think that's so important. But the one word that really stood out to me is belief. So you said your dad believed in you, your mentors believed in you, and then you said, you believe in people even when they maybe don't believe in themselves. Believe.
Right.
Like, where does that come from? Where did that come from?
I think some of it was self-reflection. I had to, when I started my own consulting practice, when I had a newborn and I couldn't really go to work full time because he was sick all the time, but I wanted to work. I think I had to believe I can do this. And I had to keep myself going. I can do this. I can do this. And my husband was really good about being positive for me too. But I think I had to learn that and believe in myself that I'm not going to allow myself to fail. And, I don't want others. And that's been the same for me in my career. I didn't want to fail others. I didn't want to fail my mentor. I didn't want to fail those I'm mentoring. And so I have to believe in them that they can do it. And I'm not going to, and I always tell them too, I'm not going to set you up to fail, because if you fail, we both fail. So if I set you up to where you are not prepared and you're not ready and you fail, that's on me. That's not on you. So I take that to heart, and I try to make sure that when I am mentoring or helping others, that I've done all that I can to pour into them without holding their hand, but giving them that nice nudge to move forward on their own.
I think that's one of the biggest things about a mentor is when you have a mentor that believes in you, you can go to just levels you never even dreamed of going. But you said one other thing too, and I want to stay here just for a second, because the mentorship that's what shapes us. And then when we're shaped, we're able to shape others. But you also said that your husband, sounds like, who's been an incredible mentor, also challenged you. And, I heard Brendan Burchard talk about one time that, when you have a mentor that challenges you, you have a good mentor. Like they challenge you to like get out there on the edge and go bigger.
Yep.
And I think the challenging part is so important as well.
I completely agree. And he does so very respectfully, and it's healthy. He's good about when I said, hey, I want to go do this consulting thing. He was like, okay, that sounds great, but let's really think about this. I want you to put a plan together. I want to see you have thought this completely through from beginning to end. How are you going to handle A? How are you going to handle B? And then when I presented it to him, he, have you thought about this though? How are you going to handle this? And so it was a very constructive conversation, but he really challenges me. Sometimes my brain goes 90 miles an hour, and he knows I'm good at having ideas, but sometimes they may not come through fruition because so many other things are going on. And he really challenges me sometimes to sit down and really think through those and make sure that, hey, what's important really does come through. And have I thought about all the good, bad, and ugly that, and how are we going to handle some of that stuff? So he's really good for that. And to your point, I think too, aside from him, just believing in others is sometimes that's all they need. Is for others to believe in them because I know I personally had self-doubt all the time. Even though I've done this 24 years, sometimes I second guess myself and self-doubt, have self-doubt, but I think sometimes just others believing, hey, you've got this. And he'll do that sometimes. He'll come in and he'll see I've had a rough day and he's like, you've got this though. So, don't worry about it. You got it. And I'm like, you know what I do? You're right. I'm killing it. I got this. So it's, and I honestly feel like I want to give that back to others. I want them to see that, hey, you've got it. And so I think a lot of people try to lead by holding hand or taking on the responsibility. I'll just do it. I'll handle it for you. And that's not me. I'm here if you need me. You come to me, let's talk about how I can help you and I'll help you, but I'm not going to do it for you. And I think that also helps to build people, and they can also see how they can help themselves, how they can do things. I just don't feel that it's my job as a leader to do their job for them because they're not growing.
Oh man, that is fantastic. So we're talking leadership, folks, and you've already talked about belief. You've already talked about challenging, and one of the questions I wanted to ask you to kind of kick this part off and so let's just continue the conversation here. I mean, what is leadership to you? I mean, how would you? That's one of those questions I get a lot of times. People will say, hey, what is leadership? What is leadership to you?
Leadership to me, it's an action. Simple. That's how I define it. It is, you can't be passive. I think you have to be doing. And by doing, I mean, you have to be a person of your word, of integrity. You have to be someone that you're leading by example. You're doing the right thing, obviously, but I also think it goes beyond you and not making it always about you. I think it's, growing others, helping others, encouraging others, and seeing how what you do impacts them and their jobs. So I think there's so much about leadership that doesn't answer all of it, but I think that kind of just gives you a high level of how I perceive it. I perceive it as the overall.
I love that. I know I'm a big John Maxwell fan, and he always talks about leadership as influence. I also think leadership is a transfer of belief. We've been talking about belief here. I mean, all of a sudden now that's all I want to talk about is belief because it's so important. He said that there's three things that his dad taught him: the value people, believe in people, and unconditionally love people. But that belief was in there once again. And so I just think that's a huge common trait for anyone that's like driving in that leadership lane like yourself, is that the belief is so important. I want to ask you this question. That is, you talked earlier about joining this organization during COVID. I mean, how challenging has it been to lead through COVID? Have you been able to navigate pretty easily through? Has it been challenging, or have you had to change your style? What's that been like?
Oh man, most definitely had to change styles. I think if anything, the guy who I interned with said something to me one time, and it had stuck with me forever because I'm like, I don't want it to ever change about that. He said that I was adaptable more than anything else. And I love that because I think that in order to be successful, you have to always adapt to whatever's going on. And so I want to make sure that I don't ever find myself too complacent or unwilling to adapt, because I think that right there starts the decline of my success. But so COVID, very interesting. This job I interviewed on Zoom. I've never even met my leadership team in person. So I work with these people. Some are in Florida, some are in Arizona, some are in Pennsylvania. They're all over, but we just talk via Zoom or text or whatever. I've never met them in person. So that's a first for me. But, when I got here, I had 2 people that I inherited that were in Colorado. So never met them either. And there were a couple people here in Texas. I was fortunate enough to meet them. And I've only seen them a handful of times, but the ones in Texas, still haven't met the ones in in Colorado. But, we make the most of it. We have adapted. I worked from home for 12 years before, so in total. So that was no big deal to me. But, we make the most of our technology. We do Zoom, we text, we have calls, we very much email each other. I mean, so we just try to make the most of it. I would say I feel that I do feel bad because we've had one team member who has started and she's new to HR. And so she's just not, I think you do learn some things through osmosis. You do learn them by overhearing others and seeing others and how they do it and being in the office. And so I feel like she hasn't really had that advantage. And so I do feel bad about that. But I try to overcome it by having regular conversations with her. We do share screens. We do as much as possible to communicate, but I also have her over my house every once in a while too, so we can be in person and we can work through her questions and issues and stuff and give her some one-on-one time. So I think that COVID definitely changed things, but again, I think it's all about being adaptable and trying to work with whatever you have.
Yeah, I love that, adaptable, and lots of communication. One of the things I was thinking about was through this time, and I've talked to other leaders about this as well, and that is developing trust. And I think that's one of the things that, to have a high performing team, I think Simon Sinek said one time, he said a great team is not a team that works together. A great team is a team that trusts each other. And I was just thinking about during this time when you're not able to get together, you're fairly new to the organization. How do you or someone in your position, how do they build trust?
It's different and difficult, but I have worked on it. When I first got here, we had a lot going on. I started at the end of August. We had some of my challenges it wasn't even on the radar for us to implement an HRIS, but it kind of suddenly became on my radar. And so I had that to do. I had a handbook to consolidate, and I had benefit plans, 3 different ones across the company and across the country, more or less, to consolidate into one, and 401k. And so it was a lot. And I had all of it kind of from September to December 31st to make it happen. And so you can't do that on your own. You have to have a cohesive team, a good team, a dependable team that you trust. And so, I told them when I first started, I'm going to go ahead and give everybody benefit of the doubt. You are in my circle of trust, and that means I trust you completely, and I want you to trust me. I don't use knowledge that I may have in terms of power or anything, or control or anything like that, because it does me no good. I want you guys to know everything that I know to the fullest extent possible. And I need to know that you're going to keep that confidential within us. And if you don't, then you can't be a part of the team. It's just as simple as that. And I think they understood very early on that I really meant it. And I started sharing things. They didn't even know what was going on in the company half the time because no one had ever shared anything with them. And so I'm like, no, I'm not about power, knowledge is power and control. I have to share with you guys so you can make the right decisions in your investigations or whatever decisions you're making based on what is going on in the company, or what's going on within our department or whatever. But I think a lot of it with my peers is I had to deliver on what I promised I could. And I told them,
Mm.
don't worry, I got this. I can do this. And I think they thought that, yeah, a lot of people say they do, but do you really? And I was like, if you tell me we're going to have it done, we're going to have it done. And we'll get it done. It's no ifs, ands, or buts. Just, hold my drink. I got this. And so, and we did. We made it happen. And it wasn't me. I don't take credit for it. It was the team. And it was knowing these awesome people had my back, and they stepped up where we needed them to. And everybody kind of assumed the leadership and the roles that they needed to for us to all get this done. And I think with my team, my peer team, in the senior leadership team, I think that earned a lot of respect, that we as a team say when we say we're going to do something, we do it. I'm pretty, a person of my word. And that's very important to me. If I tell you we're going to do it, we're going to do it. And I'm not going to let anything stand in my way. And I think they value that now. I think my boss really values that, because I think he's even told me we've had to unfortunately do some rifts lately just to right size. We've had, when you grow that quick, you've got a lot of duplicate positions, and we had 3 controllers and, lots of different payroll departments. And so we're consolidating, and it's the right thing to do, but it's not a fun thing to do. But he knew if he told me to lead it, I'm doggone a bone, it's going to happen. So I think he's told me, I don't worry about you. I know what you say. We've got it. You've got it done. So I'm not worried about you. I need you to do that for others. I need you to contact, your peer, your CFO, and stay on him and make him do it. And so I appreciate that he does trust me now, but it wasn't overnight. I had to build that, and I had to show him that, I'm going to do what I tell you I'm going to do.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's one of the things that's so important when it comes to building trust. I went out and asked a group of HR leaders as I was putting together a presentation on building trust, and that was actually probably the number one thing is doing what you say you're going to do. Build a brand, right? Build a brand that says, I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. I also appreciate you sharing the challenging part too, because so a couple different people come to mind. Dustin Pascal, he's the chairman for the Board of Trustees for Dallas HR, employment lawyer. He said on show 10, he said that, we were talking about high performing teams. And we were talking about, if you're not challenging and you're not asking questions and really challenging the situation, to him, that means you probably don't care, number one. And then the second comment I wanted to make is Diane Sanford. She's an HR leader on the border. She was a past guest, phenomenal leader. She said that one of the things that she does whenever she's going to maybe present an idea or something that's important to her, a lot of times she'll go to people that may not even be favorable of the idea, or maybe she hasn't really developed that relationship with them, and let them poke holes in it. So therefore,
I love it. Yeah. Great idea.
Prepare and go ahead and overcome all those challenges before she gets in the boardroom. So I would love for you to kind of expand on, because I think there's people out there that a lot of times they go into a meeting and maybe they don't speak up or they don't challenge the situation. But a lot of times when you do that, you're building trust during that time. But any thoughts around that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said earlier, I think that leadership, you can't be passive. It has to be active. And if you want a real leader, in my opinion, is going to speak up. They're going to do so with tact and diplomacy, and they're going to present facts and reasoning. Sometimes I think there's a misconception by some people that they feel like if they are the biggest witch in the room, or they are yelling, or they're always talking, that people see them as a leader. And it's really not the case. You and I both know that, right? Usually it's people who, they don't have to speak all the time, but when they speak with power. They speak with, they know what they're going to say. They have thought this through, or there's substance behind it. And so they don't have to talk all the time, but when they do talk, it's intentional. And so I think that's also a good leader, of knowing when to speak. And I tell somebody too, when I'm mentoring them, look, if you want to be a good leader, think about when you're presenting something, think about it. Here's what I do anyway. I think about it beforehand. When I'm going to my boss, who's a CEO, what are his objections going to be? What questions will he ask me about this? And what, obviously the cost and stuff, I try to get everything I could possibly have around it. So I am fully prepared and vetted to sell this or speak about it or whatever. And I try to do that. And I tell people, come prepared, because even if they don't ask about that, or they, don't question it or knock it down, you know more about the subject, and there may be somebody down the road who does, and at least you're prepared to speak, on that. And so to me, it's about the preparedness and just knowing your subject matter and speaking on it appropriately.
Man, that's gold. That is absolutely gold, folks. Let me ask you this. Okay, so you're we're still in this pandemic. We're taping this in February of 2021, and I think this will be played in March. Is remote work here to stay?
My personal opinion is, yeah, I think in some form or fashion it is. I do a lot of reading. I mean, I'm a nerd in that way, about HR stuff, but I really see a trend where people are now going to more hoteling. And so it saves a lot of money in terms of leasing space. You don't have to do as much. You can, have some landing spaces and a little bit of office and call it a day for meetings or stuff. But I think in some form or fashion it is. It may be 2 or 3 days a week it works from home, but I think definitely in some form or fashion. I think if anything, the pandemic has shown us that we can. And I personally just know, and in talking to people and bringing up this subject matter, I think as employers, I do think there's value in being in the office, but I think making people come back to the office 5 days a week probably will hurt morale a little bit, because people have gotten accustomed to, their work schedule and saving money on lunch and tolls and gas and things like that. So I think I think in a way, I don't know that it's going to be every day, but I think in some form or fashion it's here to stay.
Let me ask you this question. I always love to listen to our guests talk about when they you went to school, you got a management degree. I got a management degree. I had no idea what I was going to do. And then of course you did an internship and you got a master's in HR and on your way. But now that you've been doing this for a long time, I mean, you've been very successful. Was there a time when you were like, I love what I do? Or did it happen over time? Like, was there a time you said, hey, I found my purpose in my career?
Oh gosh, I think I've been fortunate enough throughout my career to have that epiphany many a time. And I know a lot of people don't, but I think I've been very fortunate to where don't get me wrong, there are days that are tough, but there's tough days no matter what you do, even if you're not working, there's tough days. But I think I enjoy it so much that there have been many days that I'm like, wow, I kind of like what I do. I kind of, and I feel kind of weird saying it, because sometimes what I do is not the fun stuff. I'm doing investigations on some really weird stuff, or I'm terminating people, or, I'm doing some things that aren't that, sexy, but it's my job. But I think all in all, I feel like I really like what I do. I feel like I like, and I think part of that, to be honest with you, is I've gotten to really work with some awesome people, and that makes a huge difference. It's funny because the older I get, the more introverted I get, which sounds, I know no one believes me, but but I kind of am. But it's funny because at work, I thrive on being part of a team. I love being part of a team, and that's a motivator for me. And so that's why it's so important for me to make sure that my team is cohesive, and I keep them motivated, and I keep us, just in sync with each other, because I find that invaluable. And people may say they don't, but deep down inside, I've found through 24 years, they really do. They like being part of something.
Hey, I want to ask you another question, and I haven't teed you up on this. It just I'm
Yeah.
curious. You know, you seem to be a very driven person, and I'm just wondering, when you got out of college, were you driven to be a CHRO in that top leadership, or were you just driven to do something else? I'm curious what drives you.
Gosh, what drives me? A lot of things drive me. I always wanted to, I did want to be an employment attorney. I thought I did want to do that. And then of course, after grad school, my next venture was I'm going to go go into law school. And then as luck has it, I met my husband and I decided I'm done with school. So I had my certification and I had my master's degree and I was like, moving on, it's time for life. And so, but I've always been very career driven. As a matter of fact, I told him when we first met that, hey, if you're wanting to get married and have kids, you need to move on because I'm moving up that career ladder. I want to go to the top. And he was like, well, why can't I go with you? And I was like, because you just weren't part of my plan. I'm on that train. I just want to keep going. But he has been nothing but supportive, and he's great. But yeah, I wanted to consult. That was always a goal of mine, and I fortunately met that, and I did that for 5 years. And then I was like, I want to be a CHRO, and I was like, I just don't know how I'll get there, but I'm going to get there. And I've just been blessed to, the roles that I've had that have led here. But my family motivates me. I think I keep myself motivated by saying I got to keep doing more. I got to keep doing more because I just don't want to get complacent. And I think that's what scares me more than anything is just becoming complacent.
Yeah. Listen, I appreciate you sharing that. I know there's people out there listening that can either relate to that or it may give them a different perspective. And whenever you made that last comment about getting complacent, it reminds me of the High Performance Habits, a book I read by Brendan Burchard. And he talked about one of the habits is the habit of necessity. You feel it like it's necessary. Hey, let me ask you, I want to dive in, we're talking about leading teams and being part of this team. I want to talk about leading you. And leadership is every day. Of course,
That's a full-time job.
I would love to share just a typical, a day of Jill Cole. Do you have a system? Do you have a morning routine or an evening routine? Something, a daily practice that keeps you on track as a leader?
Work and personally, I'm a list maker, as I know a lot of people are, but I have a list for list. And I constantly, at the end of the day, I will go through my to-do list and say, okay, what's priority for the next day? And I make sure I do my list. And then the next morning, because you and I both know work doesn't stop at 5 or 6 o'clock. So there may be stuff that comes throughout the night or early the next morning because we're on different time zones that kind of take away from that priority and reprioritize it. So before I start to work, I will check it again, reprioritize. And my goal is to get at least 50% done during the day. There are days that, I don't dictate my day, employees dictate my day. And so it could be one phone call away from taking me into an investigation or doing something or an email. So I just try to stay as organized as possible because honestly, if I'm not organized, I get stressed. And so I'm very meticulous about just keeping the environment around me organized, but also keeping myself organized.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Are you an early riser or a late nighter?
Oh, I'm kind of neither right now, which is funny. I'm in bed every night. Well, right now with it being a sun the way it is, I'm in bed like at 7:45. I watch TV but I try to go to sleep about 9 or 10, but I get up at 5:45 or 6, get my son ready for school and start the day. So I would say probably an early riser out of the two.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you this. I always like to ask this question, and that is, you make these lists. Do you do that in your phone or do you do that in a planner? What's kind of your routine?
I do it on a legal pad. Everything I do is on a legal pad.
I love it.
I love it. So yes, I can't. I tried to go, all electronic and do it, but there's something that is so gratifying about just scratching it off, and so I like to write it out. I'm old school.
I share that in a presentation that some people, they love it. They're infatuated with to-do lists. As a matter of fact, I sometimes will have a list and I will find myself doing stuff, then going, oh, that wasn't on the list. And so I'll write it down just to
Write it down.
just to feel that satisfaction of crossing that out. And I'm sure there's people listening right now.
I did more than I wanted to do today, or expected to do today. Look at me go. Yeah.
Oh,
I
that's
totally
fantastic.
Get that. Yes.
Oh man. Oh man. All right. I love this part too, because whenever guests share, we can validate that, hey, you know what, we do that too. And that makes me feel good that, I'm doing this, or maybe I need to try that. So that's excellent. Hey, I got one last question before we get into time to accelerate. And I always like to ask our guests a question. If you ever been given any advice and it was so good that you find yourself sharing that with others, it could have come from a family member or a friend or a colleague. Anything come to mind?
Yes. One time, we talked about previously me being kind of high strung and everything. So one time I felt like early in my career, I felt like I failed something. And someone came up to me one time, great mentor, and he put his arm on my shoulder and he said, hey, let me ask you something. Is this going to matter in 5 minutes or 5 weeks, 5 months or 5 years? And I said, no. And he goes, then don't worry about it. It's not part of the big picture. It's not worth your stress now. And I was like, okay, you're right. It's not. If it's not going to matter in 5 weeks that this happened or that I failed, or 5 months, why am I giving it my joy right now? And so I just try to remind myself of that it's kind of don't sweat the small stuff. Just said a little differently, but it has helped me kind of put things in perspective, I think, sometimes. And I try to tell others that too. I'm like, hey, listen, it doesn't matter. 5 weeks from now, we won't even know or care. Just don't even worry about it. We're good, So try to make light of things that aren't worth it. And, that has really helped me kind of, again, put things in perspective and kind of remember, don't sweat it if it doesn't matter long term.
That is so good. That is so good. Oh man. Listen, I told you before, the time is going to fly and it has just flown by. And so we're going to shift to the last few minutes into it's time to accelerate. And so I have a few questions for you. The first question I always like to hear is, do you like to read books or would you rather listen to a podcast?
Podcast. I'm too ADD for a book.
Any podcast that you enjoy?
Oh gosh. Bruce, I'm a crime junkie fan. So I really like crime junkie podcasts because I can put those on and just mellow out. And so that's actually kind of my go-to, if I have to travel somewhere, that's actually what I listen to.
That's interesting. My daughter loves the crime shows. I had a guest on, I forget what week, but Adrienne Court, CHRO at Alchemy. She likes to listen to like humor and it makes her laugh. And I was like, that is fantastic. Cause I'm listening to, leadership growth and, oh my gosh, books. And no, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Listen, we just got out of an incredibly difficult year. Now we're in 2021. I feel like we're still in this pandemic, but yet we're navigating through that. I always like to ask, what are you grateful for?
So much, so very much. Man, it would be hard to even, tell you. My health, my family's health, my family, my husband and my son, our friends, the amazing team I get to work with every day. They are phenomenal. And I get to call them my friends too. So they're in my friends. There's so much I could go into, but I think there's so very much to be grateful for. I think we sometimes get caught up in what do we wish we had, but I think sometimes we just need to think, what are we grateful for that we do have? Because what we have, others want. And so I just think we should be grateful for everything we have. So that I'm very grateful for a lot. And my job, because a lot of people don't have a job right now. So
I love how you included your colleagues and the people that work for you and with you. I just think when you use that word friends, because it's more than a job. It's more than a career. This is life, doing life together, trying to make things happen. Right. That's fantastic. I love that. Well, what are you most excited about in the year 2021? I mean, here we are in February, and this is actually going to play in February.
Um, Man, I'm just glad it's not 2020 anymore. I'm glad that's done. 2021 has not been so good to me personally, just a few personal things going on. But I'm just grateful and looking forward to this podcast. It's an awesome opportunity for me. Nothing I've ever done before. So that I'm going to get to serve on the University of Houston College of Business Board, a panel there. So that's also a new opportunity for me. So I think spreading my wings a little bit and doing things that are outside of my comfort zone. But again, it goes back to that, got to shove myself sometimes, nudge myself a little bit. If I can't push others if I'm not pushing myself. So I've got to show others it's okay to get out there and spread your wings and be vulnerable sometimes. So I'm doing it this year.
I can't push others if I don't push myself. That is fantastic. I'm writing that down. That is so good. And you're right. You're right on point. And that's where the growth happens. That's where the growth happens.
It is.
So,
Absolutely.
you bring amazing energy. Amazing.
Oh,
What
sweet.
energizes you?
Right now it's my family. I'm really, you go through phases of life. And I think I'm at that phase where I definitely love my career and I love what I'm doing and who I work with, but I also love being a mom. And so, I have an 11-year-old. And so I am really big on just cherishing every moment I get to spend with him and being with him because, he's growing older every day and so am I. And so I just try to make sure I relish every moment with him, even when he makes me want to pull my hair out. But also my team, I love working with my team every day. They at work, they really make me want to get up and get at it and do for them and not let them down. So, I'm very fortunate. I am very fortunate.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So my daughter has 2 kids and they energize me. I'm right there with you. Oh man. Okay. So, we come down to our final question. And I always save the best for last. And here's the question. Jill, 10 years older, is knocking at your door and you're going to go answer that door and you open that door. What's she going to say to you?
Enjoy the ride. Every bit of it, the good, the bad, and ugly, because it happens for a reason. Just enjoy it. Even when, I think that's part of what a lot of us don't do is we don't enjoy the moment. We're always looking forward to when's the next shoe going to drop or when's this going to happen. And I'm guilty of that. And I think sometimes it goes back to me just relishing the time with my son because I'm like, this is the good. This is like, I will be sad one day when he goes off to college. So I want to enjoy every second with him that I can. And so I think my son will be 21 in 10 years. And so I think, I think she would say, enjoy every minute, even, through everything and just try to make the most of it.
Well, this has been energizing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate you. You are definitely driving in the leadership lane, Jill, and it's been an honor today. Hey, if somebody wanted to, get to connect with you or get to know you more, how would be the best way that they would connect?
Probably LinkedIn is probably the easiest. It's just pretty simple. Jill Cole, SPHR, and there's a black and white headshot for me from a few years ago. But that's me, just a few pounds heavier now. So, I would love to connect with anyone, and feel free to shoot me a message in the inbox. Love to connect and stuff. And Bruce, I just really appreciate you allowing me this opportunity. It's been fun, and I've loved meeting you and getting to know you. And so I've definitely got to give Mike a big thanks for that. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Big shout out to Mike Pierce. Hey, if you're listening to this podcast on Apple, go down and hit that subscribe button, hit that 5-star rating and give us a review and let us know how we're doing. And I just want to say thanks again, Jill, for coming onto the show, sharing your wisdom and your perspective. I know I'm very confident some of the things we talked about around leadership and trust and belief, they're all going to help our listeners and anybody watching this. So for that, I say thank you, and I cannot wait to share this with everyone.
Thank you so much, Bruce. I really appreciate it. Again, the honor was mine. Thank you so much.